I was just putting the pieces together from the first question, like what would happen if money went away and how would that affect you specifically? But you asking them, like you having them describe what would actually happen. That way they can see it in their minds rather than you telling them, if your money goes away, then X, Y, and Z is going to happen. Then the person might just say, no, duh, I already knew that. Right. But it's a whole lot different when they're actually walking through what would happen to them as like specifically. So I was just raising my hand to be like, wow, like this is powerful. Like this is incredible.
Yeah. And to reinforce what you just said, when they describe it, that's beginning to create the circumstances for them to be able to make the internal decision. When you describe it, it sort of bounces off them, right? And doesn't get in really deep. So we want to kind of have this come out of them. So I'm going to coach them to paint a picture, describe what you're seeing in your mind, visualizing, and they might come back and say, well, and depending on who you're talking to, and you might even want to help them out a little bit. You're sort of observing. Are they readily forthcoming with answers, or are they struggling a little bit? So if they're readily forthcoming, I'm just going to let them throw out whatever they throw out. Well, I couldn't pay, I couldn't pay the bills. And if you move past that too quickly, you're missing out on the opportunity to get them to really describe. So yeah, that makes total sense. The bills. So specifically, what bills? Like what would be like the top 3 to 5 items that come to mind? So most people are going to rattle off what I call the big 5. Okay. And if they're not, as the agent, you need to be aware of that and making sure they cover those 5 in your conversation. So the big 5 are things like housing, food, transportation, utilities, and kind of everything else. And the very interesting thing is I've had tens of thousands of these conversations with clients, coached thousands of people. And I'll tell you, the number of people who actually volunteer that they couldn't buy food is like 1 in a million. It is fascinating to me that people's answers are almost always related to debt. Couldn't make the house payment, couldn't make the car payment. The industry has trained us that the biggest responsibility you have is to pay the bank, as opposed to putting food in your family's face. And so I always bring up food, and they're like, oh yeah, food. You don't get a bill for groceries, and you don't get a bill for restaurants. It's like if you don't eat, no one cares. You get really skinny and then you die. And so food is a pretty important thing to talk about. In a second, I'll show you how to make food a hyper emotional conversation. It's one of the things I really think is really powerful. So let's just use mortgage. Is this too specific, or are we getting too granular here? Or?
I actually think that granular is good because of the fact that our listeners and even me, I'm walking away like I should buy these policies right now.
Hey, we're making a sale. Awesome. So let's say the person comes back to you and says, I couldn't make my mortgage payment. Again, if you stop there, you're missing out. So I might say, okay, so if you don't make your mortgage payment, how many months do you think you can go before the bank's really, really not happy with you and can begin the foreclosure process? Would be one possible question. The other way to say it is, what do banks do when people don't make their mortgage payments? And then the person comes back with foreclosure. You're still not done. It might seem obvious to say, oh, well, therefore we need more life insurance, right? Mm-hmm. I want them to really describe it. So can you describe for me the scenario where the bank actually has foreclosed in your house? There's an eviction notice nailed to your door. There's a U-Haul truck in the driveway. Your kids are standing there sort of bewildered and crying. What happens next? Can you visualize that and describe that for me? We want them to go deeper and deeper.
You get into the core.
Where are you going to live? What part of town are you going to be in? What are the schools going to be like? What is it like for your children to leave their friends, their neighborhood, their teacher, their environment? If they tell me, well, I'd move into an apartment. Okay. How's your credit after not making a bunch of mortgage payments and being foreclosed on? Oh, my credit's trashed. So what part of town do you need to live in where the apartment manager or property manager doesn't care about your credit? And I just kind of pause, and they're like, oh, a really bad part of town. So in that same part of town where you're going to be living, what kind of schools will your children be attending? So again, I'm just asking questions. And the more they describe this stuff, I actually have people on a regular basis cry. Now, it's not my goal to make people cry, but my feeling is, turn tissues into dollars, right? The more tissues you're going through, probably the more dollars you're going to make. And so don't be afraid to go there, because here's the issue, guys. I am totally willing to take people down a deep tunnel of hypothetical questions to avoid them dealing with the horrible reality of this actually happening and them dealing with it in the real world. And I will tell them that point blank. I will say, I'd rather have this hypothetical conversation with you now than the horrible conversation of, oh my God, what are we going to do? And I say, I don't know. So as a professional advisor, we need to be willing to go there and take them there, because most people will stop at, well, I couldn't pay the bills, duh, and not go any further. And that's why they remain unprotected. So
yeah, I just want to say something about that. Just the willingness to go deep. I mean, we talk about in our leadership journey about the importance of having courage, leadership courage, and I just think that that's so important. The willingness just to continue to go deeper as opposed to staying at the surface level.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it does. Let's be honest. It does take some courage, right? This is going to be a squirmy, uncomfortable, messy conversation.
I was getting uncomfortable listening to the questions. I was like, oh man, this guy is really digging deep. Like, like asking them to describe what, like how would they react once they see the U-Haul? Then after the U-Haul, like once you actually move to the new neighborhood, where are your kids going to go to school? I mean, those are not easy questions to ask.
Yeah, we're not kidding around.
Yeah.
I will tell you that as much as we talked about creating visuals in the mind of the client, I think you as the agent need to have the visuals as well. So as I'm describing that, and I'm asking those questions, I swear to you, I am seeing a home. I am seeing a U-Haul. I actually have a little girl in my mind who's clutching a little bear, and I'm seeing her crying. And I'm right there as the advocate for that child to try and get her parents to see what I'm seeing and to get them to describe it. And what does it feel like to be not only the new kid in school, but the new kid in school at a dangerous school? What does it feel like to have the student-teacher ratio be so high that your child can't get a good education, and have their classmates be so disruptive that they can't get a good education? I mean, to a parent, this is horrific, right? That's the emotion I need to get them to act in their own best self-interest and get the coverage they need to go away, because no matter what they want to say, it's a money issue. They need to buy these future dollars at the incredibly deep discount that they can acquire them now through the purchase of the life insurance policy. And we've got to stop sugarcoating it. We've got to stop talking about the generalities of cheeseball stuff like protecting your loved ones and all this vague garbage that doesn't really get anybody to connect with anything and doesn't cause them to act. Because I'm going to tell you something. It is not my goal to plant seeds, initiate conversations that take 2 years to come to some conclusion. If you have the gap, if you're sitting there as a father of 3 kids with your $50,000 workplace insurance, and I fully support the idea of, say, for example, the stay-at-home mom or the stay-at-home dad for that matter, and you're sitting there telling me that you have everything covered and you're fine, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask questions until you're sweating or crying. So, I need salt wherever I look at, right? I need tears or I need sweat, because it's the salt that's going to get the thing sold. And if you're not an advocate, a fierce advocate of your client's children, then I don't think you should be having the conversation. I think you should leave the conversation to somebody else who can have the passion and the belief and the conviction and the commitment and the confidence to take that person to that place they need to go to make a decision in their own best self-interest.